I thought today's budget was a good budget. I thought it was one of the better Labour budgets there've been in the last 13 years. It was an authentically Alistair Darling budget. I felt that it was his budget, he owned it completely, and I thought that in the circumstances it answered the questions that needed to be answered reasonably well and laid a solid foundation for the future of the economy.
This was the necessary budget of a steady as she goes, very solid, reminding that Labour has actually saved the country from what might have been a dreadful depression. Unemployment less high, growth, back on track. There are no great whiz-bangs in this budget, no great giveaways. But I think Alistair Darling gave a sense of terrific optimism, that he's got it in hand, he knows how he's going to get the deficit down, it doesn't have to be all that painful, and it certainly mustn't be this year. I think he left the Conservatives with very little to say.
I thought it was more confident than his previous performances. I think the first one, he was obviously quite nervous, and I thought last year's was somewhat clouded by the fact that it was taking place against a backdrop of a collapsing economy. This one, I think he's sort of played himself in a bit better, and the objective conditions for the economy are slightly better than they were, or a lot better than they were a year ago. So I felt that he was able to articulate his view about where he wants to see the economy going from here. Obviously he had three real economic challenges here. One was to ensure there's not going to be a double-dip recession, so that's a short-term challenge. The medium-term challenge for the next 4 or 5 years is to get the budget deficit down and have a credible plan for reducing the scale of our borrowing, keeping the market sweet. And the longer-term challenge was to sort of reorient the economy and change its nature so it's not as dependent on financial services and the City of London as it has been. So that was what all the measures surrounding small businesses, infrastructure bank, all that was about, trying to change the nature of the UK economy. And I think in the circumstances he did a pretty good job.
This was in a sense quite a political budget, not with frivolous giveaways, but with a solid message that says we're on track for things to get better. If the Conservatives come in now and start cutting this year, unlike any of the other G20 countries, we risk a double-dip recession. We risk even going into depression. Don't let them do it. It left, I think, the Conservatives looking rather uncomfortable.
What Labour had to do was to articulate some story about how the economy had developed and was developing and differentiate themselves from the opposition. And that's what the undercurrent of Darling's budget was, which was, had we not intervened as a government, the recession would have been a lot worse, and we intend to carry on intervening in the future to lay the foundations for a different sort of economy. And he tried to say that this was a different approach from the one that would have been followed by the Conservatives, that they would have let the economy find its own level, that the recession would have been a lot worse, a lot more unemployment, a lot more business failures, and therefore it did articulate a view about what the role of the state should be and where Labour should be positioning itself. And I thought that actually he made a reasonably good fist of that, and that's why I thought it was quite an impressive package.
I don't think there was a very large redistribution in any direction, but insofar as there was a very small one with a bit of extra stamp duty on houses worth over £1 million, well, I don't know how many of those are sold a year, probably not a great many, in order to pay for less stamp duty, no stamp duty for first-time buyers on cheaper homes. But otherwise, the big taxes on the rich had already been announced, coming in next month, 50p on anybody earning over 150,000. That's quite a big wallop. And the national insurance change is coming in the following year, an even bigger wallop. So there wasn't really anything very much extra to sting the rich.